Welcome back to Typically Unique. I'm Kim Aponte, and I'm here with my husband, Carlos.
Hello.
So before we start this episode, I just want to give a little disclaimer that we are not medical professionals. We are just parents who were living this experience. And in this episode, we're going to talk a lot of medical information that we saw that was explained to us and that we saw with our son. So this is just us making sense of it in the best way we can. So could be some errors or
and it's almost like speaking a different language, right?
Yeah.
If we learned a different language and we were trying to speak to people from that area, we would certainly not speak it fluently. We would probably not put the words in the right places.
Right.
And you may not understand fully, but we kind of have the gist of it. We can ask where the bathroom is.
We got immersed in it for
Right.
sure. That's how we learned.
That's how we learned this language. So
Yes.
the first three videos that we showed in the previous episode was a pretty good foundation, right? I think it kind of set or it showed the timeline that we had. Mm-hmm. It showed, when Aiden got each one of these pretty rare disorders. Mm-hmm. And we talked about how a lot of this stuff that he was dealing with, we believe kind of started from the bone marrow, right? And then the stem cell, and then it would, kick out some cells that would split into two different sides and all this stuff. And we talk a lot about, the myeloid side, the lymphoid side. And I know I say this side, that side a lot, maybe in these videos. Maybe you can explain a little bit more of.
Yes. So this first video that we're going to show you, Carlos made these videos for Facebook when he first did it. And so he's illustrated on the board, starting with the bone to represent the stem cells in the bone marrow. And that, when the doctors explained it to us, there's two distinct sides of the two issues we're dealing with, the AML and the Bruton. So on the board, the left side of the board is AML. So when you hear left, that's the AML
Or the
side.
myeloid side. Yep.
Yeah, the myeloid side, but the leukemia that we're trying to cure Aiden of, and that's mostly what is going to be focused on in this video that we're going to show right now.
And then the right side is where the IgGs are and all that, and that's the lymphoid.
But we'll be looking at that later.
We'll be looking at that later. We
Right.
will mostly focus on this side. So let's,
for this part.
without further ado,
Yep.
and again, sorry to the folks on
Well,
on iTunes, but again, you can go to,
Yes, they can go to YouTube and see the whole thing.
and our handle there is
Typically Unique.
fantastic. All right, so here's the first video.
All right, hopefully everybody's following all this medical jargon so far, but really if you're not, this is essentially just for Kim and I. We need to kind of document everything that we've learned in this moment in time, and we thought a video blog would be the best way to do it. So right now we're on chapter 3, which is AML, and that is the cancer that Aiden has. It's acute myeloid leukemia. And going back to the timeline, Aiden was diagnosed with AML in August of 2010, and since that time he's been receiving chemotherapy. Going back to the bone marrow, of course, is where blood and blood cells are generated from, and the stem cell comes out and from the bone marrow and creates a white blood cell. Now here's where it gets kind of sketchy for me, but from what I understand, the white blood cell kind of splits into a myeloid and a lymphoid cell, and then it kind of tracks differently. As we know, on the lymphoid side, Aiden was diagnosed with agammaglobulinemia, and his were IgGs were not maturing, but we're going to focus on the AML side. And on this side, basically what happened for Aiden to have leukemia is that his white blood cell starts to mature, and then it continues maturing, and then at some point during its maturing stage, it mutates into this leukemia cell, where in normal folk, the white blood cell would continue to mature all the way until it's an adult white blood cell. And then it has many purposes, but I guess for this diagram, let's just call it that it mutates from the white blood cell. So basically what happened is, by the time Aiden was diagnosed, 25% of his white blood cells had mutated into leukemia. So when they did the bone marrow test, Aiden had 25% presentation of leukemia in his bone marrow. So that was certainly of concern. He was admitted into the hospital and put on a very aggressive chemotherapy plan. I'll explain how all this kind of comes together, because we noticed there were some very interesting dynamics that came along, not only on this side, but this side. So we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Okay, so that was, some of the stuff repeats a little bit, sorry for that, but I just to have it flow for me in each video, that's kind of what I did, so apologies for that, but
we're trying to make sense of it for ourselves as we go. That's why that was so helpful.
Exactly. And we had so in that video, I think I start talking a lot about the mutation of the white cells, right? That is what caused Aiden all the problems for AML. And that's why we're in the hospital, right? We're in the hospital to stop that stem cell that turns into a white cell, to stop it from, as it moves down the line there, it mutates into a leukemia cell.
Yeah, as it's maturing, something happens.
Something happens. So why we are in the hospital is to stop that mutation. And when I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe when Aiden was originally diagnosed and they did the bone marrow, he presented at 25% of his supposed matured white cells turned into leukemia cells. So 75% good, 25% bad. And maybe you can explain that.
That's how, I first think of it when you hear 25%, you think out of 100, but which I guess makes sense. First, I was shocked to hear that. That just seemed high to me. I don't know. And we thought we caught it pretty early because of football. So I can't imagine if we, would have waited and what that would have looked like. So, but, when we were talking about that ourselves off camera and, making sense of it, I remember the first time he was diagnosed with AML when he was 5, and that one ended up not being AML. What happened back then was they made that claim before they did the actual test. And my understanding was that they looked under a microscope at his cells and were expecting to see what they call blasts. They would use that word with us a lot, or rods. Probably parts of the cells that they're looking for, and that's the mutation or the deformity or whatever that is the leukemia. And when he was 5 and they looked in the microscope for those, they saw none. And not only did they not see those, they didn't see the white cells either. So that's why we're like, what's going on here? And then that's when we got the immune deficiency. But they were looking for the blasts and looking for the rods, and they didn't see any back then. This time they look, and whatever they're looking at, however much was there, 25% of it had the blasts and the rods, was my understanding of that. So
right. We are currently in the final round.
Yes.
Right. And so we know that Aiden's getting close to being finished with this round and hopefully curing the AML.
Right. And when we're talking about the 25% and how they come up with that number, they were looking for that number at the end of every round. So we knew it was 25% when he started. So then at the end of round 1, they did a bone marrow test, and then they would look to see, what was in there. And I don't know if it was, I think at the end of round 2, they got to 0.
0, yeah.
Yes. So that's where we've been this whole time.
Right. And that's solely because of the chemotherapy, right?
Right.
So that's what took that 25% to 0.
Yeah, they knocked out all those.
And he kept showing that. So,
because when you get chemo, they're killing everything.
Right.
So the blasts and the rods and all the good ones.
So we are going to find out if we were able to stop the mutation, I guess, in this next video and see where we're at with that. Right? Okay.
Yep. So we'll look at that.
Okay, we're on chapter number 4 of the video book. And if this is the first video you're looking at, I strongly suggest going all the way back maybe to the preface or chapter 1 and start from there, because 4 and 5 aren't going to make much sense. So, but let's talk about a cure. And basically, what we are here at Rainbow Babies and Children's to try to cure is Aiden's cancer. He has AML, acute myeloid leukemia. His blood cells, white blood cells, are mutating into leukemia cells, and that mutation caused them not to mature like they would in normal folks. And so he has leukemia blasts or rods in his blood, and of course cancer is not good, so they are doing aggressive chemotherapy to reset his bone marrow, so his bone marrow will make white blood cells correctly and not mutate into leukemia cells. So everything starts from the bone marrow. They're stripping the bone marrow with aggressive chemotherapy. At this point, it seems to be working. The last couple bone marrow tests that he had showed no leukemia in his bone marrow, so that's very good. He's been going through chemotherapy for the past 6-7 months, very long time. So he's ready to go home. We predict that today is April 1st, and we predict he has about 11 more days to go here at the hospital, and then he'll be completely cured. Basically, Aiden needs to recover his neutrophil counts. That's what they look at on the myeloid side. They look at his neutrophil number because that's what fights infection. And the neutrophil number has to be at least 200. If it reaches that, they know it'll continue to rise into normal ranges, which is about 1200 to 7700. And so once they see that he starts rising above 200, he'll be able to go home. A month later, he'll get a bone marrow test to make sure that there's no more leukemia in there. If it's clear, then he has been cured. Then we just hope there is no remission, but we don't want to talk about that. So as you can see, over the past 5 days, Aiden has had 3 days where he's had some counts, neutrophil counts, so the bar is filling. Once we get over 200 twice, he can go home. So that is the cure for AML and leukemia. We're well on our way, and it's our hope that he'll continue to do well. The question now becomes the A-gamma globulinemia that Aiden has. Is there any cure for that? The doctors have told us for years no, but we think we ran across a little medical miracle, and we'll talk about that in chapter 5.
Okay. All right. So I think in that video we kind of saw that everything that they've been doing has stopped the mutation. As we mentioned just before this video, that he's presenting at 0. So we feel like we have the cure, right? So that was number 4 of the 5 things that I wanted to talk about. That was number 4, and we feel like in 10 days or so we get to go home. Hopefully he doesn't relapse, right? I messed that up in the video. So
right. Well, first of all, you did a really good job in that segment of explaining the AML side, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how the cells, what's happening, and how that leukemia is showing up, and what the treatment is supposed to be doing.
Right. Which is stopping the mutation, which we got.
Right. So we just gave that whole overview of like where we're at in round 5, and numbers are coming back up, waiting to go back home.
Yep.
And yeah, when you were talking about that, you said hoping for no remission, and I was like, "Oops, you want remission, you don't want to relapse."
Right.
So
yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that part because
I'm speaking a different language and sometimes I use the wrong word, but yes, you're right. I was just watching it. First time I've ever caught that, so that's interesting. But
so then in this next part,
we so I again I had like 4 chapters I wanted to do, but I think the real thing, I was setting a lot of that up, and I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to talk about this potential medical miracle, because nothing has happened at this point. We just have a belief.
Yes.
Right?
Just our thought.
Just our thought. So, I was like, maybe I shouldn't do that. And then, I got a lot of gumption or something. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just talk it into existence. Let's just put it out there, because no one will ever believe us unless we say, this is what we think. And it made sense. We would not have done this if we were like, okay, this is a stretch, like we were really thinking this just makes sense. It just makes sense. And I'll talk a little bit maybe after this next video, but
we'll show you.
Yeah. But the thing is, to set it up a little bit better, is that the doctors, nurses, everybody associated with the Brutons was like, No,
hard no.
Like this, what you are trying to explain to us cannot happen.
And quit asking.
And has never happened in the history of the world.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, keep that frame of mind. What we are questioning these doctors about has never happened in the history of the world.
Yep.
So that's why I can understand that they are a little hesitant.
Right.
But so, okay.
We were a pain.
I'm passionate about setting this part up because this is the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about, at least in this thing. But let's get to the next episode. Shut me up, and, we'll pick it up from there.
Well, the next video clip.
Yes.
So watch that, and then we'll talk about it.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to have to do Medical Miracle in 2 parts. So here's part 1, and hopefully I can set this up. But basically, here's what happened, here's what we stumbled into. As you remember from the previous videos, Aiden has agammaglobulinemia. He's had it since 2003 when he was diagnosed with Bruton's, which is a form of agammaglobulinemia. Every 3 weeks, he has an IVIG infusion. He's had it since 2003 and will have it for the rest of his life. That's what the doctors tell us. Aiden, unfortunately, was diagnosed in August of 2010 with AML. AML is acute myeloid leukemia. So, Aiden has these 2 rare disorders, basically both coming from the bone marrow, but one is agammaglobulinemia, the other one's AML. Right now he's been in the hospital for the past 7 months because they're treating Aiden for AML. When the bone marrow starts making cells, it makes a white cell. The white cell has a myeloid cell and a lymphoid cell. As you can see, they're on separate ends here. The resetting of the bone marrow through chemotherapy, intense chemotherapy, has been the way that they have tried to fix or reset the bone marrow in cancers, blood cancers, when previous to chemotherapy, Aiden makes blood cells, then somewhere through the growth of that cell, it mutates into leukemia. By resetting the bone marrow with intense chemotherapy, this cell that splits into the myeloid cell now reset itself and skips this mutation area and becomes a mature cell. This is where it gets tricky, and I'll explain it in the next video. But we were told that the agammaglobulinemia, even though it comes from the bone marrow, because it's on this side, the lymphoid side, and because Aiden's IgG levels, IgA levels, and IgM levels never mature and stop right here, that Aiden will never be cured with this, even with a bone marrow transplant. That this is something so downstream, and I don't understand all of it, but it's so downstream that because he stops right there, he'll never be cured. So something curious happened along the way, and I'm going to explain that in the next video. So just remember that Aiden is receiving chemotherapy treatment to strip out and reset his bone marrow. Doctors are telling us it won't affect his agammaglobulinemia. It'll only affect the AML, acute myeloid leukemia. We beg to differ. So let's see what happens next. Bye.
All right. So, as we talked about in the previous episode,
Okay.
Kim is focused on AML.
Right.
That is what we're here to do at Rainbows. And we believe we are 10 days away from us going home and him being cured of AML.
Yep.
And the little absolute neutrophil thermometer count that we had on there, which
coming up.
You know, it's getting close to 200. We reached that number twice. That's it. All right. So good on the AML side, but remember, Aiden is getting these IVIG treatments every 3 weeks for the rest of his life. That is the bane of his existence. He cannot stand that. He hated it prior to getting the AML. He's not looking forward to it going forward, right? Yep. He does not want these IVIG infusions every 3 weeks for the rest of his life. So we took what we thought was a common sense approach to the beginning of all this, right? Which is your bone marrow, which houses your stem cells, which starts these white blood cells, or these cells that mutate to the myeloid side and the lymphoid side. And it's all coming from the same place, right?
Right. I thought you did a really good job. So on the board, it was clear to understand that you've got the stem cells that are producing the cells that are going off to do these two different jobs in two different places, or what, you know, that's our understanding. Myeloid side, lymphoid side. And doesn't it, I mean, what do you think listening to this? If you're treating the source, which is the bone marrow, all his issues come from that. So if you're treating that, and they know the goal is that's gonna fix the left side, the AML side, doesn't that make sense that it would fix the right side also?
No, Kim. Let me play doctor. No, Kim. And I know you've asked this question 1,000 times since you've been here, but the answer is no, because everything that is happening on the lymphoid side with this IgGs, IgAs, and IgMs are happening downstream. They're not happening at the source.
This is how it would go. Yeah. And I mean, we're not slamming doctors. I get it. They're the experts. We're not. and we're hounding them with these questions, make it make sense. And they just didn't, like you said, they had no experience with this, no knowledge of it. There's no research reports anywhere about it. There's no medical journals anywhere about it because it had never happened before. So we get that, but still, it made common sense to us. I don't know. Leave a comment because I would like to know how you would see it and what you would think.
And I should save this for the next episode because I know we got to wrap this one up. But I just want to mention this. When you used to take Aiden to Cleveland, right? Because when we first started these IVIG treatments, it didn't happen at home. We got that later. But we would travel 50 miles. Kim would travel 50 miles to take Aiden to Cleveland to get these infusions. Mm-hmm. I went a few times, and when I was there, I saw a room full of people. They had about 5 to 10 stations, at the first place we went to.
Everybody was going in, yep.
And I looked at all these people like, all these people have to do this for the rest of their lives? And if there are people who have X-linked agammaglobulinemia or Bruton's, I want you to know that we were fighting for a cure for this because nobody ever had been cured from this disease that we were told, over 1,000 times.
Right.
Oh, you can't cure it.
No cure.
And to be in that position, maybe you're 40 years old and been doing this for 20 years. If you'd have known 20 years ago that, hey, there's something out there that may help, I think you would have been looking at that, right? So I don't want to...
At least to know something could possibly...
Maybe. We don't know. But
be an option, but we're going to... we believed that.
Yes, that's what I was just going to say. Yes.
This was what we were believing, hoping. It was a hope. And, like you said, if not, he's already getting... the IVIGs every 3 weeks. You just
keeping them alive.
You're right. We're grateful for that.
Yep.
But he would much rather not have to do that. So
absolutely,
we will show you more about that in the next episode.
Oh, we're gonna get deep in the next.
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
We're gonna get deep.
And we'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye.